In this lesson, we're going to learn about creating new objects inside of Softimage and working with objects such as moving models around. So here's where we left off, and throughout this course I'm going to be saving out the Softimage scene files, and you'll find them inside the project files, our ICE project, and inside the scenes folder. So let's open up 05 imported geometry, or just continue along. So let's say we want to select this base here and move it around. Well, we can do that over here on the right hand side, which is our master control panel, and specifically under the transform options. So you can see we have S, R, and T, which stands for scale, rotate, and translate. So for the translate, or to access translate, you can either click this T here, which brings up a 3D manipulator, or hit the V key. Now to access rotate, you can hit the C key, and to access scale, you can hit the X key. So again, that's X, C, V, or just left clicking on these. So let's move this back a little bit, and let's move it a little to the left, let's say. Okay, so now let's select something else. Now you'll notice that if I left click and drag while I have one of these transform tools selected, that I continue to transform my object. So I'm just going to hit Control Z, and this can be a good thing or a bad thing. This is all depending on how you want to work. So if you want to get out of a transform mode, you can either hit, or if you want to get out of any tool mode, I should say, you can either hit the hotkey of that tool. So to get out of transform, I could hit V again, or to get out of anything, I can just hit the space bar, and that gets me back into my selection tool. Now, of course, the space bar works like many other things in that we can hold it down and select other things, and as soon as we stop holding it down, we go back to whatever tool was previously used. So if we need to transform a lot of objects, we can go to our transform, hold down space, select or shift select our objects, and now we're back in our transform mode. Or we could, of course, hit the space bar or go up to our select tool right here in the top right corner and select our objects there. Now let's say we want to disable or change that clicking and dragging away from the transform manipulator. Well, that can be done using the edit menu of our transform. So we can go to transform, and let's scroll down and go down to transform preferences. Now, of course, you can tear these off as well by going to the scissors icon, so we can drag it around and go down to transform preferences. And so now we have an option to change the click outside manipulator. So I'm used to it either doing no interaction or using or selecting the select tool. So I'm just going to change mine to select tool and close. And now if I drag outside, I am in no danger of selecting or moving something that I don't want to. So now let's take a look at how we can create new objects inside of Softimage. Now we can do that with the help of these different toolbars, or these different drop downs up here on the top toolbar. Now you'll notice that inside each of them is a get section, and this will create a new either object or a new property of an object, such as a new material on an already existing object. So the primitive tab is in all of these, but inside of the primitive are exactly the same. So we can click the scissors icon to take a look at the primitive under model and under simulate and see that they're the exact same options. So creating a primitive or creating something under one of these menus is exactly the same as creating it under a different menu. Now the only differences between these menus are what you can create and what you can modify. So you can see the modify menu is mostly for modeling tools. Or I'm sorry, the modeling menu is for obviously modeling tools. So we're primarily going to be working with the simulate tool, specifically the ICE section. So up here is where we can create new objects. Now we also have access to this over here on the left, so we can change this to any of the different command modes we have up here. So again, this is just another way of creating these different things, perhaps making them a little bit easier to select and move around with. So let's go to primitive and let's create a new null. And this will be what we can emit our particles from. So if you're not already in your translate mode, hit the V key, and let's move this up in the Y. And let's just rotate our camera around to make sure that it's inside of this beaker here. Let's maybe move it down a little bit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Alright, so now that we have a null in place to begin emitting particles from, we can deselect and move on to the next lesson. So in this lesson, we learned how we can select various objects by going to the select tool up here in the top right, or hitting the space bar to automatically go to the select tool, and how we could use the transform options over here on the right control panel to move objects around. Now there are a lot of different commands inside of this transform dropdown. So remember, in Softimage, if there's a little arrow here, that means that there's probably a lot of things you can do by left-clicking that. So you'll notice under Select, we have a lot of different options available to help us with selections. And the same can be said for our Transform. And obviously, inside of these different menus, we can create various objects or various properties, or modify existing models and objects inside our current scene. So that was just a quick overview of the Softimage interface, and in the next lesson we'll start working with ice.